Okay, so we're continuing on with our nested loops and printing towers of numbers, numeric, what did I call them? Triangular numeric outputs. So the next one is use nested loops to produce the following output: 1, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so again, we'll start over here with the pseudocode. So we have rows and columns again. So for the row, again, the row goes from 1 to 5. And then we look at the columns. These are always going to start at, well, I mean, it doesn't always start at 1, but here, you know, each of these, in each row, we always have at least one column. So that's this column 1. And then this, the upper value is the one that depends as a function of the rows. But in this case, again, just like the last problems, the row and the number of columns are the same. So that linear relationship or that linear function is just y equals x, or column goes up to and includes the row. So we'll just go up to row here. 1 row, 1 column, 2 rows, 2 columns, etc. And then what are we printing? Again, it's a print statement. So now in the row 1, column 1, so you could do something like this: row and then column and then print. If you want to see what's happening, row 1 has only 1 column and we're printing a 1. Row 2 has a first and a second column and we're printing a 1 then a 2. Maybe I'll draw a line between these rows. So you can see a little bit better. Row 3 has has 3 columns, 1, 2, and 3. And in column 1, we're printing a 1. In column 2, we're printing a 2. In column 3, we're printing a 3, etc. Row 4, we have columns 1 through 4. And you can see for each row and each column, what's printing is actually the column. So what's printing in here is the columns. And again, notice when I write my pseudocode, I'm indenting here to help me. I've indented here to help me, so it helps me see that this loop stops there. This outer loop will then contain another print line statement to get me from one row to the next. You could pause here and go over to Eclipse and code it. I'm going to do it in that same code as before. So we'll just keep going with another method. So I have a print line statement after that tower of numbers, and now I'm going to have, what should we call this? We'll call it an increasing tower. I know I have tower of numbers. Now I'll call the function lowercase increasing capital T for tower. It has an error because I haven't defined this function yet. So I'm going to scroll down below my other two functions, figure out where one of them ends. So that is the ending brace to that function. I'm no longer in main, and I'm going to say public static void increasing tower. Increasing is lowercase, tower is uppercase, open close parentheses, open brace, hit return, and that error in main should have gone away. So we'll go check it. Yep, went away. After I call that function, again, I'm going to want a print statement. So syso control space, fill that line of code in automatically for me. Great. And you know, you could do something like this if you want to help see it better. Tower of ones followed by a print line. Tower of numbers followed by a print line. Those were the two previous problems. Increasing tower is the third problem. So I'll come down here and just put a comment in. This is number 3. Print a triangle of numbers increasing on each line, on each row. Luckily, we already have the pseudocode. Row goes from 1 to 5. So making our first loop. I guess I could put in this comment line, use nested loops. Maybe this gets a little long, so I'll just make a second line of code of commenting. For integer row, starting at 1, row less than or equal to 5, increase by 1. For people who type a little slower, you will get faster. Practice helps you get faster. So all this coding that I'm doing, I encourage you and expect you all to be doing it. Okay, now we have our column loop. Starts at 1 and goes up to row and includes it. Again, I think I talked about this in my last couple of videos ago about starting at 0. In reality, we could just for this content because they're physical things. We can see row 1, we can see row 2, we can see column 1, column 2, column 3. It's easier to start at 1. Okay, I forgot to put my integer here, integer column. You'll forget things like that. Not a big deal. You just figure out what you did wrong and fix it. Lots of errors are a good thing in computer science. They help us figure out what's wrong with the code. But what you don't want to do is you don't want to keep coding with a bunch of errors. You want to correct them as you go if you can, so that you don't get too many. Then it becomes hard to follow and figure out why they're there. Okay, and we're printing. I think we said we're printing the column. Yep. And then again, outside that inner loop, hit return and put a print statement. That'll get me to the next line so that nothing, they don't all, let's take it out for a second just so you can see why we're putting that in. Run it. Notice my last tower is no longer a tower. There's my 1, there's my 1, 2, there's my 1, 2, 3, my 1, 2, 3, 4, and my 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Nothing is separated because I didn't print any lines. So everything printed on the same line, and that's why I need this statement. Good. Okay, we got one more, and it's very similar to this one, except it goes in the reverse order. So again, if you need to pause and see what that function we just wrote looks like, there it is. Or if you wanted to go back up and see what main looked like, there it is, and you can pause and fix what you need to. Also, this code will be posted on Canvas, so you can always look back at that. There's one more. Use nested loops to produce the following output. So 1, 2, 2, 3, 3, 4, 4, 4, 4, 4, 4, 5, 5, 5, 5, 5. So it's an inverted triangle. So I'm gonna go ahead and call the function inverted triangle. I don't know if it's really inverted, but just what I'm calling it. And then I'll do a print line statement. System out, control tab, print line, and I'll come down and make the method declaration for inverted triangle after my other 3 methods. So make sure this one's end. See, that's still this loop. So I have all this empty white space that I can get rid of to see that this increasing tower ends here. Return and return. Notice I should be at the same level for all these methods, the same indentation level. each of these methods public, the word public is in the same spot on all of them. I mean, that, you know, the indentation is I'm doing that, or Eclipse is doing it for me. If this function starts over here, it's still going to work. It's just harder to follow and see what's going on. Public static void inverted tower. Open close parentheses, open brace. And now I should not have any errors in flow. Oh, inverted triangle, we called it. So I do still have an error. Yeah, triangle is better. Oh, that's the wrong one. Let's call it inverted tower. Let's change it up here. Since I called the other one a tower, let's call this one a tower. Tower of ones. I called them all towers. So inverted tower makes more sense than inverted triangle. So no errors there. I didn't tell you what inverted tower does, so let's put a comment in. Number 4, use nested loops. Output an inverted tower of increasing numbers. Maybe, again, that statement's a little long, so we'll just tab in. There we go. Okay. I'm going to leave Eclipse. I don't want to start coding this. I can't. I want to get the pseudocode first. So that's back over here. It's a little tricky. So what we have is we have a loop of rows. So again, for row starts at 1, goes up to 5. So the tricky thing here is, what's the first thing printing in the first row? Is it 1? And the answer to that is no. In this first row, the first thing printing is a bunch of spaces. If you want to see the difference, it's up. This is like number 2. If I print the 1 first, it's going to print there. I have to print those spaces first. So I'm going to set up a table here for the row. Hey, where did my pencil go? And the number of spaces I want to print. So in row 1, how many spaces do it? Let's call it space. How many of these spaces do I need, or spaces, I guess makes more sense. In row 1, we need however many numbers we have down here. So there's 4 numbers in front of the 5. So in row 1, we need 4 spaces. So let me come back and give you a little more logic. How this is going to work for each row. Oh, my pen is being funny. For each row, we're gonna print the spaces first. And then we're going to print the numbers. So there's 2 different things happening within each row. And then after those numbers print, we need to get to the next line. So then we're going to print line. So there's really 3 things happening within the row loop. And the first thing that's happening within that loop is the number of spaces that are going to print. So how many spaces printing in row 1? 4. How many spaces in row 2? 3. Row 3 has 2 spaces in it. Row 4 has 1 space. And row 5 has 0 spaces. So again, we can think of spaces as a linear function of rows. As the rows increase by 1, they're all increasing by 1. The spaces are all decreasing by 1. So the slope is -1, or if I think of it as, y equals m times x plus b, and here's my x, and here's my y, then the slope, I can see it's -1. The change in y over the change in x, -1 over +1. My slope is -1. To figure out my y-intercept, the b value would happen when x is 0. So I can actually just go back up 1. If x were 0, what would this be? Well, that would increase by 1, so that would be 5. So my equation here for the top of the spaces is spaces, or y, is equal to -1 times the rows plus the 5. So there's my slope, my y-intercept, and then this is playing the role of y, and that's playing the role of x. So that's the top end of the spaces. I'm going to scroll down and redo this loop. So for row, and this takes a little bit of practice. Row equals 1 up to 5. Now we have a loop of spaces. And they're going to start again at 1 and go up to -1 times the row plus 5. And then I want to check this. So when the row is 1, this value here, -1 times 1 plus 5, would be 4. So it goes from 1 to 4, and we print 1, 2, 3, 4 spaces. So inside here, we're going to print a space. When I'm on the second row, so this is 2, this -1 times that is -2, plus 5 is 3. It's a loop from 1 to 3, so it prints a space at 1, a space at 2, and a space at 3, so it prints a total of 3 spaces, which is what we want in row 2. In row 5, -1 times 5 is 5, -5 plus 5 is 0. It goes from 1 to 0. It won't run the loop at all because it doesn't satisfy the upper condition of the thing, so it won't run. Okay, so there's our spaces. Now, just to test that, we might then just print, well, what's supposed to print after this? The number, but what number is printing in each case? Row 1 prints 1s, row 2 prints 2s, row 3 prints 3s. So let's just print one row here and just see what happens. So that's going to be analogous to the second set of things. It's not done, but I just want to test it, printing the numbers. And then after I print those numbers, I'm going to still need a print line statement. So after this, I'm going to put in a print line. This is not going to be complete, but it's going to be almost complete. Again, you could pause here and jump over to Eclipse and write this function on your own. Or you can do it with me, or you can watch me and then do it. Any of those things will help you learn. Probably the best is to try doing it on your own, see what happens. But there's lots of these problems on homework too, so you'll get practice. Okay, so for when we switch, we have to use proper syntax. Integer row, so I'm back in inverted tower over here, by the way. For row equals 1 to 5, so up to row less than or equal to 5. Semicolon, row plus plus. And again, this syntax probably for us is new, but pretty quickly we get used to it and we adapt. Okay, now I'm running a second loop for integer spaces equals 1 up to spaces equals -1 times the row plus 5. Now there's more than one way to do this. We could have started the spaces at 4 and decreased here. But I wanted to show you sort of a way of establishing the linear relationship that will serve us well as we go forward. It's giving me an error. Oh, it should be space plus plus here. Still, oh, I see. I called it spaces, so it doesn't like the space here. Spaces. Still giving me an error. Oh, we want spaces here to be less than or equal to that. There we go. That needs to be a comparison, something that ends up being true or false. And then inside this loop, we want to print a space. So system. So to print an empty space, just put a quote with a space in it and another quote closing it. Now, the reason I have to do something else is because if I just do that, I won't know if it's printing spaces or not. I can't tell. I can't see the spaces. So that's why I have this other thing here where I'm printing just a row here. System.out.print. You could print the word test. You could print anything, but because I know I want to print the row number, I'm going to print the row here. So this is all happening. Let's see. So this printing of the row, something doesn't feel right to me there because I think that, let's see, print our spaces, then we print the row, then we need a print line statement. I want to make sure I get that print line in there so that I can get to the next line. So it's a loop to run the spaces, and I'm printing the row once. After it does spaces, then I'm printing a line. And I don't have quite what I want, but it's close. I'm printing 1, and then 2, and then 3, 4, and 5. And remember, what I originally wanted is an inverted triangle. So I need not just a single 2, but 2 2s, and 3 3s, and 4 4s, and 5 5s. But the structure, the spaces are correct. And I'll just, if you need to pause and copy that code, or, this is a little bit tricky. So, copying it doesn't really work. You want to try to recreate the logic. And the logic is a loop for the spaces, then I'm printing the row outside that loop, then I'm printing an empty line. Okay, so this printing of the row is actually this printing of the numbers here. And that's similar to something we already did. I need to use a loop to do that. So rather than printing the row here, this line is actually a loop about how many columns we're going to print. For a column, it goes from 1 to, so in row 1 we print 1, in row 2 we print 2, in row 3 we print 3. So again, it's from 1 to row, and then we're going to print the row. And that is replacing that single print statement. So I want to loop at the same level as the space loop, right below it. So for a column equals 1, column less than or equal to row, increase the column by 1. I kept that print statement because I want it. I need the declaration of column. So I replaced this print statement. Instead, I put it inside of a loop that runs from column equals 1 up to column less than or equal to row. If you want to see why that's true, again, row 1, 1 column. Row 2, 2 columns. Row 3, 3 columns. So up to column equals row. Okay, now we run it. There it is. I feel myself getting tired, so I know I've covered a lot in this video. This may be, both these videos, they may be videos that you want to go back to at some point. Hey, oh good. I was like, where's the video? Panic. Here I am. So these may be things that you want to come back to and look at again. It's a lot of, I covered a lot in these two videos. So, you know, it's very similar content, but it gets confusing. And in this one, you know, notice, so our outside loop of the rows contains several loops, one for the spaces, one for the columns. Each of those loops contain a print statement. First we're printing spaces, then we're printing the row, then we're printing a single print line. If I wanted these numbers to increase, like go 1, 2, then 1, 2, 3, I change this row to column. It'd be similar to one of the other previous problems, and these numbers would increase as we went down. Clever, huh? I won't do that in that print statement. I'll leave it as row because that was the original problem. 1, 1, 2, 2, 3, 3, 3, 4, 4, 4, 5, 5, 5, 5. This is great. We're getting practice with the syntax. We're getting practice with loops. Hopefully we're understanding where these braces, they mean a lot. It's where the loop opens and closes. It's also where the variable is defined. So if I want to use spaces, I can only use spaces inside that loop, the variable spaces. I can only use the variable column inside this loop. Now I used the column more than once, but they're different columns each time. So here's the code of the function we just did, inverted tower. I'm going to scroll back up to main. Increasing tower is there, number 3, there's number 2, there's number 1. They increase in difficulty level. Tower of ones, number of towers, tower of numbers, increasing tower, and inverted tower is all of main. Hopefully you catch all of that. This code will also be posted. So if you need to go back and look at pieces of it, you can. Then the last thing that we'll do for chapter 2 is similar stuff where we're looking at images, but we're gonna define a class constant size that can change. And so the loops and the printouts will be dependent on the size that we're given. Then we can, if we just change the size, it'll change the image, the size of the image that's output. So that's sort of the next level up. And there'll be sort of one last topic in chapter 2 on that stuff. And that'll be very similar to what our first project is requiring.